Number 5. Draugr. First up on our list is going to be the Norwegian undead creature, the Draugr. If you're a fan of RPGs like Skyrim or God of War, no doubt you are already very familiar with the Draugr, because you've likely encountered roughly 30,000 of them in one of Skyrim's many crypts. Now, the ones that populate Bleak Falls Barrow aren't exactly impressive, so let's learn about the real-life inspiration. Well, you know, as real as a mythical creature can be. A Draugr, sometimes also called a dragon, is the ghost of a warrior who has stayed on Midgard. Draugr live in their graves, often guarding some treasure they'd collected in their worldly days at their burial mound. This is why, in Skyrim, you find them in the hundreds in tombs. That makes the most sense where you'd find a bunch of zombies, right? Ancient folklore suggested that if a man was to be lain to rest without actually being lain down, so if, you know, a body was left slump over or sitting, kneeling, what have you, any of the many ways that warriors land after they've passed, then the soul wouldn't be able to rest, and their body would be reanimated as a Draugr, doomed to protect their gold for the rest of their days in this mortal coil. It's said that those with dark spirits become Draugr, those with hearts of greed, hate, or with unfinished dealing. Now, in life, a Draugr was a mighty Viking warrior, and in death, they keep that immense strength. Draugr are said to be supernaturally strong, although they give off an appearance of weakness, you know. They look necrotic, rotten, and generally foul, and are described as being pretty difficult to put down permanently. Some folklore even saying that they are resistant to most human weaponry. Now, an interesting bit of Draugr trivia that some stories describe is them having the ability to walk through people's dreams, where they'll leave behind a gift so that the living person may be assured of the nature of their visit. A Draugr can curse someone in their dreams and mark them as a target, bringing disease, pestilence, and misfortune to their victim through the daylight, and then at night they can seek them out and strike. Now, the best way to stop a Draugr is before they even rise altogether. In some cultures, the dead were buried with their toes tied together, or needles driven through the soles of their feet in order to prevent them from walking. The dead were carried feet first into their mausoleums, then bricked up behind a giant door. It was thought that the dead would only be able to leave the way they had came, and if they were carried feet first, they wouldn't see where they were going. And if you want to see more videos about cryptids, monsters, mythical creatures, real scares, well, we've got all of that and then some on Top 5 Scary. Click through, subscribe, and stay scared all night long. Number 4. Rougarou. A Rougarou is a creature of French folklore, and it's sort of like a more Cajun answer to the werewolf. The name stems from the French word for werewolf, loup-garou, that over the years has shifted into Rougarou as one word when being told and retold to generations in Louisiana and across New Orleans, and some parts of French Canada too. We got a Quebecois werewolf. I didn't know about that, and that was very exciting for me. This creature, for the most part, is very similar to a werewolf. It's a giant man-wolf hybrid. The key difference between a werewolf and the Rougarou, though, is agency. While a werewolf traditionally is depicted as being powerless and at odds with their curse, often transforming, you know, at the worst possible time. It's always right before a big date or dance or something. A Rougarou has way more control. It keeps its human intelligence, its consciousness, and its faculties about it, even while it's changing into a monstrous wolf form, presenting the most dangerous elements of man and wolf. Throughout the 16th century, it was thought that the monstrous Rougarou was responsible for just about everything that could go wrong in a village. Missing livestock, robberies, people missing, all the work of troublesome French werewolves. So, like I said, it resembles one pretty closely. Ferocious claws, giant teeth, bipedal wolf man, although it can conceal itself as just a regular looking human, so you never know who you can trust. Just keep an eye out for anybody munching on dog treats at lunch. In Cajun legends, the creature is said to dwell in the swamps and the backwoods. There are several variants and local legends for where the Rougarou stems from. Sometimes, the legend states that it was someone who was cursed, either by voodoo or witches, and cursed to have a lust for human blood. Another really interesting variation I found of a Rougarou's origins is that they are born out of those who break the rules of Lent, coinciding with old legends being told to get Cajun children to behave. If you make a promise to give something up for Lent and you break your promise, it's said a Rougarou will sneak into your house while you sleep and drag you by the toes into the murky swamps, never to be seen again. The workaround? Just don't make any promises for anything, ever. Don't ever try to improve yourself. Number 3. Night Marchers. Much like their Norwegian cousins the Draugr, the Night Marchers are a mythical legion of ghostly warriors who refuse to break formation, even in death. The Night Marchers come to us from Hawaiian folklore and are the ghosts of ancient Hawaiian warriors who serve as the royal vanguard for a sacred king. They rise on nights that honor their ancient gods, and they're said to come forth from their burial sites, or even to rise up from the ocean, returning to the world of the living once more. The Night Marchers rise, but leave their bodies behind still entombed in the dirt, and are spectral warriors, unlike the Draugr. They don't have physical forms anymore. Kinda cooler, to be honest. They appear as they did in life, though, dressed for battle, carrying their spears, clubs, beating their drums, blowing conch shells, letting just about everybody know that they are back and their advancing march is coming towards you. Now, despite being named the Night Marchers, they don't actually march. Their feet don't touch the water or ground as they sort of float through the night, and unless you saw them with your own eyes, you wouldn't know they'd ever existed. They don't leave any traces of anything. I mean, I guess that makes sense when you don't have footprints. Now, on nights that honor them, they march through the darkness as soon as the sun sets and spend the rest of the night marching ever forward. It's said on these nights you can hear their chanting, their marching, and you can become very aware of the foul, death-like odor that follow them. Now, it's said that if you do hear the telltale sounds of the night march approaching, the absolute last thing you want to do is be as foolish as to try and go steal a glance. I know it sounds tempting, a legion of ghostly warriors, but ancient folklore says that any mortal looking upon the night marchers will meet a swift and violent end. They can't be stopped by anything physical, so no walls or cells are going to do you any good. It's said that the only way to survive an encounter with the night marchers is to show them proper respect, to lay face down, motionless, and you'll be spared. Another way is if you can recognize your ancestor among the march, you can call out to them. But that doesn't really work for anybody. That only works if you have an ancestor who's already in there. Generally, I would do my level of best to try and avoid meeting the gaze of the night marchers, just, in general. Number 2. Ushi-Oni. Coming up next on the list is going to be a demon from the land of the rising sun, the Ushi-Oni. An Ushi-Oni is a demon taking the form of an ox, and its name literally translates to ox demon. I love when they're literal like that. The Ushi-Oni is depicted many different ways, but one trait that's common across all versions and depictions of the creature is that it's bearing the head of an ox with a body of something wretched that it should not have. Sometimes it's got a horrible, spider body, and it's got all these long, elongated legs. Sometimes it's got a scary mammalian predator body, like a cat. Sometimes it's even got the body of a human, but the head of an ox, like a Japanese answer to a Minotaur. Case in point, always has an ox head. Something scary down below. Consistent across all mythologies of the Ushi-Oni though is that they are absolutely remorseless, brutal demons who love to inflict pain and love to hurt humans. Not really my scene, but to each their own. They're exceedingly cruel. They love to ravage towns, attack lone villagers, spread plague and pestilence wherever they go, and the Ushi-Oni have even been known to take the last piece of pizza out of the box and they still leave the box in the fridge and don't tell anybody else. Absolute terrible creatures. Their favorite prey, you could probably guess, is humans, which they guzzle down as a little snack whenever they can find one. Their breath is noxious and is said to be toxic to people, so best of luck even dueling one of these things. Not only is it a powerhouse with awful teeth, but they vomit poisonous gas, so I'm gonna be honest, your odds, they're just not looking good. The only comfort is that, well, first of all, they're mythical, and they're only said to live along the mountains, rocky coasts, and beaches of western Japan, so as long as you're avoiding those areas, you and the Ushi-Oni shouldn't be crossing paths. And finally, number 1. Minangol. Closing off our list of horrifying mythical creatures that would give Lucifer a clutch for his pitchfork is going to be the demon vampire spirit of the Philippines, the Minangol. And let me know down below in the comments if I'm pronouncing that right. My Tagalog needs a bit of work. Not settling for just being terrifying enough as a blood-sucking spirit of the night, the Minangol takes the myth of a vampire and cranks it up to 11. It sounds way more like something out of one of the new Doom games than it does folklore. The Minangol is a humanoid creature, and it's a scary, hideous, monstrous thing with giant leathery bat wings, which lets it fly through the night, swooping down and stealing prey before anyone can do anything about it. We haven't even started talking about the Minangol's namesake and its best gimmick. The name comes from the Tagalog word tangle, again, let me know if I'm pronouncing that right, which means to remove or to separate, with its name translating kind of literally to one who separates itself. The reason for this is because the Minangol can split its top half from its bottom half, taking to the skies as a disembodied torso with horrid bat wings flapping around, causing all kinds of terror. I can't imagine anything quite as horrifying as just a torso with wings and it's, I don't know, guts and entrails free-flowing flying around in there. I don't know if it seals itself off or if there's a ton of spill every time it does this. Much like traditional vampires, a Minangol is said to be thwarted by garlic. Sprinkling a little crushed garlic, Salt Bae style, on top of a disembodied torso is enough to get rid of it. So keep a few cloves in your pockets. It's said it prefers to prey on sleeping targets, and I gotta say, no honor in doing that. And it seeks out newlyweds or couples in love. Very good news to me, which means I'm probably safe forever as a guy who eats a lot of garlic, doesn't sleep much, and keeps to myself.
Number 5. The Lerlean Hydra. I'm no Hercules per se, Yeah, nothing. But thankfully, actually, because those are pretty big shoes to fill. Because that dude had to be brave beyond just like deep breaths and good pep talks. Guy had to literally fight like a 10-story condo building. How does one dude equipped with a club and a sword kill a 10-story building with teeth and 3 heads? Well, 5 heads. Well, 10 heads. Depending on how many you cut off, I guess. I guess that's why his name will be remembered and mine will be lost at sea. I guess he was a demigod, half powerful, half regular. A little unfair. By the way, which Hercules did you grow up on? I grew up on the Disney version, and Kevin Sorbo. Ugh, what a hunk. But there's been a lot, including the ancient real guy. She's known as simply the Hydra. As a serpentine water monster in Greek and Roman mythology, it's terrifying. Its lair was at the Lake of Lerna, also known to be the entrance of the underworld. Yikes. In the myth, the monster is killed by Hercules, as the second of his 12 labors. Okay, so this guy did it and then went on to go and do like 10 more. 10-0. Like, how hard can it be, right? I mean, it does have multiple heads. Yeah, it does have that. Also, apparently has poisonous breath and blood so violent that its scent is even deadly. Later versions of the Hydra story added regeneration to the monster's abilities too, so it can just start growing heads back at will. For every head chopped off, the Hydra would regrow 2 heads. So every time the Meg bites a head, there's 2 more. Another 2 are growing. Yeah, good thing this thing was hungry and swallows whales whole because that's gonna be a lot of protein. Number 4, Jormungandr. Keeping it in the mythology department, we head up a little north. Jormungandr, aka Huge Monster, also known as the Midgard Serpent or the World Serpent. It is a sea serpent and the middle child of Loki and giantess Angrboda. And those middle children, huh? Always the problem kids. I would know. I am one. According to the prose Edda, Odin took Loki's 3 children by Angrboda, Fenrir, Hel, and Jormungandr, and tossed Jormungandr into the great ocean. The serpent grew so large that it was able to surround the entire earth and grasp it in its own tail, as it's referred to as, well, the World Serpent. And apparently, when it releases its tail, Ragnarok will begin. Yeah, basically a destruction to the end of the world. Yeah, all this rich history is so heavy and gloomy, isn't it? Isn't there like the sun will shine like California for all to enjoy? Like, where's that written down? Nowhere, huh? Just cataclysms and monsters. Jormungandr's arch enemy is the thunder god Thor. And apparently a megalodon too. Cause let's face it, a giant serpent versus a 4-story great white, it would definitely be a good fight. I think if Thor showed up and started smashing up both, it would literally be the best Marvel Universe movie yet. Another encounter comes when Thor goes fishing with the giant Hymir. When Hymir refuses to provide Thor with bait, he strikes the head off Hymir's largest ox to use as his bait. Okay, easy, Roid Rage. Sheesh. They row to a point where Hymir fishes, he prepares his fishing line and a large hook and baits it with the ox head, which Jormungandr bites. Thor then yanks the serpent up from the water and the 2 throw hands. Okay, so it sounds like it isn't that big. I mean, it's huge, but the wrapping around the planet has got my dimensions off. Maybe it was like a metric versus imperial thing back then. I don't know, what do you think? Comment down below who would win, because when it gets into mystical powers and stuff, it becomes a little unfairly matched, no? Number 3, Cthulhu. Come on, we know this guy. Now this would be a good fight. This is sort of fathomable. Well, kinda. An extinct shark versus a made-up ender of worlds. Cool, let's do that. Basically a giant humanoid octopus dragon versus the Carcharaslus megalodon. A triplex-size apex predator. It's definitely gonna be in Vegas and pay-per-view, I'll tell you that for free. Cthulhu is a fictional cosmic horror entity thought up by the twisted mind of cosmic horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. First introduced in his short story called The Call of Cthulhu, published by the American pulp magazine Weird Tales in 1928. He's like the first creature Lovecraft pondered up. He's terrifying. He's supposed to bring Armageddon upon us when he wakes up from the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, again, not all sunshine and rainbows with these stories. Actually, like, ever with these stories. Cthulhu is a great old one, almost the god of all gods in these stories. All these characters intertwine and apparently he's our last call. Lovecraft depicts it as a gigantic entity worshipped by cultists in the shape of a green octopus, dragon, humanoid, bipedal creature. And it's like 10 stories high. Yeah, like massive. Like us looking at toy army men. The Lovecraft universe, aka the Cthulhu mythos, its appearance alone is enough to haunt your dreams. Lovecraft describes this guy as a face full of octopus-like feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, sharp claws on its hands and feet, and of course, dragon's wings. So it can fly and swim. In other words, the worst thing you can imagine. Yeah. Cthulhu can fly, which he has on the Meg, for sure. And also, the mind control. I don't know how sharks' brains works, but Cthulhu gets in there. Yeah, you're in trouble, Sharky. Number 2, the Leviathan. Okay, so we're diving into some very sacred texts now. The Bible. In said pieces of scripture, there's a tale of a giant creature that could swallow up cities, apparently, and is also an awesome roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland. Gotta try it if you haven't been on it yet. This twisty, turny, vicious monster was actually modeled after this twisty, turny, vicious monster, the Leviathan, the second of the great monsters described in the book of Job. This Leviathan is an absolute unit of a sea monster, who's impervious to literally any human weapon. I mean, what were the weapons back then though? Like bows and arrows, swords maybe, little pokey things, you know? It's not gonna do much. Apparently locusts too, yeah, those are terrifying. This Leviathan breathes fire. It emits smoke from its nostrils, and it's related to another ancient monster called Loten, a 7-headed giant serpent who's represented as pure chaos. I mean, what Bible creature isn't terrifying though? Was this giant sea snake a water dragon? Because apparently it's something like 300 miles long according to the Bible. So it's like Jormungandr territory, but longer. Maybe it's the same creature, told by 2 different peoples? Mind blown. Again, the Megalodon I think would just chomp this thing and dive deep down to the Twilight Zone and it's lights out. We've seen Jaws, right? Yeah, picture that but like 40 times the size. Yeah, we're gonna need a bigger boat. Number 1, Godzilla. I had to, obviously, we're having fun here today. Godzilla, yes, of course, the king of kings, aka kaiju, originates from a series of Japanese films. The character first appeared in the 1954 film Godzilla and became a worldwide pop culture icon ever since. Appearing in a ton of different media, 32 films, 4 American films, video games, novels, comic books, TV shows, you name it. Godzilla has been, like I said, the king of all monsters. Of course, a phrase first used in Godzilla, King of Monsters. Godzilla's enormous. It's destructive. It's a prehistoric sea monster awakened and empowered by nuclear radiation. With the nuclear incidents of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Lucky Dragon 5 incident, Godzilla doesn't really like nukes. Yeah. The amphibious reptilian monster is basically based around a concept of a dinosaur, erect, standing up, very tall. Of course, a bony plated back and tail, and let's not forget the special abilities Godzilla has as well. Atomic heat beams, or as I like to call it, stank breath. Dude had tonsil stones so bad, nuclear energy generates from them. Well, not really, but inside of his body using electromagnetic force to concentrate it into a laser radioactive beam. Amphibious, of course, so it swims and breathes underwater, which is gonna come in handy. Immune to conventional weapons and can regenerate. Yeah. And it's massive. Of course, Godzilla was said to average around 150 feet tall. In the American version, Godzilla is like 400 feet tall. Like, just a little bit bigger. This is kind of a no-brainer here, obviously, right? This little sunfish would have nothing on the king.
Number 5 on this list is the Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is one of the most famous urban legend beasts in the entire world. This creature is apparently very common in the Central Americas and was first spotted several decades ago in Puerto Rico. Wikipedia says, physical descriptions of the creature vary, with some describing it as more dog-like, while most others describe it as reptilian and alien-like. Some report it as being a heavy creature the size of a small bear with a row of spines reaching from the neck to the base of the tail. So it's that one comment about it looking alien-like that really stands out to me and leads me to believe that it could be from space. These creatures are apparently very vampiric in nature and are often reported as killing the livestock of the locals. Goats are specifically on the menu and get targeted by these creatures a lot. This wouldn't be uncharacteristic alien behavior because think about how aliens respond to cows, another common livestock victim of these otherworldly creatures. Couldn't it be possible that the Chupacabra is from outer space and needs to eat these goats to survive? I think something interesting to note as well is the fact that it just kind of appeared in 1995. Before then, nobody had ever seen it or heard of it before. Maybe it came from outer space and crashed down on Earth in that year and it hasn't been able to leave since then. Considering this creature's tendencies, I truly don't think that this theory is that outlandish. Number 4 on this list is sky serpents. Sky serpents are part of a larger category of cryptids called atmospheric beasts. According to people who have seen these creatures before, they are living mammals or beasts that are made out of organic material, but they break all of the rules that we typically have for the animals that we regularly talk about, such as the ability for these animals to fly without having
having any wings. Sky serpents are defined by Cryptid Wiki as snakes or elongated serpentine dragons that appear to float or fly in the air. They typically move in an undulating fashion as if they are sea serpents of the air. They are not the same as ordinary flying dragons. Certain sky serpent sightings resemble brine shrimp because of the thin nature and thin arms, making it move or glide throughout the air because they manage to fly without wings, like most Asian dragons that have the ability to also fly. There's a few pictures that have surfaced about these sky serpents, but nothing that can unequivocally confirm their existence. The pictures that have come out though seem to show them as very large worm-like creatures that can pass through the sky. Artists' renditions of these beasts are a lot scarier though. A giant flying worm is bad enough, but the pictures that show these multi-headed dragon-looking creatures that seemingly swim through the air, that's a new tier of terrifying. I feel like these are probably just a made-up legend, but if there are some Rayquaza looking things just chilling in the sky, then we could definitely be in for some trouble, guys. Number 3 on this list is Fenrir. Fenrir is a creature from Norse mythology that is extremely dangerous and very scary. It's basically a giant wolf that is actually a giant that you really don't want to pick a fight with. Viking Jewelry says Fenrir was the most famous of many wolves creatures mentioned in Norse mythology. He was the son of the god Loki and the giantess Angrboda. The gods of Asgard raised Fenrir in order to stop him from wreaking havoc across the 9 worlds, but he grew quickly and caused so much trouble that they decided to chain him up. The gods convinced Fenrir to let them chain him up by pretending that they were playing a game to see how strong he was. Fenrir easily broke every bond. Eventually, the gods had the dwarves make a special chain that was stronger than any known but appeared light. Fenrir was suspicious of this chain and demanded that one of the gods put his hand in his mouth while he was being chained as a sign of good faith. The god Tyr agreed to this even though he knew he would lose his hand. When Fenrir realized that he had been tricked, he did indeed take the hand of Tyr. Meanwhile, the gods chained him to a boulder and placed a sword in his jaws to keep them open. The resulting drool formed a foamy river called Expectation. The ominous name of the river Expectation appears to be a reference to Ragnarok, the end of the world in Norse mythology, when Fenrir will break from his chains and get his revenge. Fenrir is also said to be the father of Skoll and Heidi, other giant wolves that chase the sun and moon respectively. It's also said that when Ragnarok comes, they will finally catch their targets and devour them. So there we have it, guys. If we live long enough, then we might just get to see Fenrir break out of his chains and come and devour us all. Something nice to look forward to. No, but in all seriousness, we wouldn't stand a chance against this beast. I can't even begin to comprehend its size and the power that it has. With one swoop of its massive paw, the entire planet could just be wiped out. For all our sakes, it's a good thing that it's currently chained up, because if it was loose, because if it was to come to our planet, then the future would look very bleak. Number 2 on this list is atmospheric jellyfish. Atmospheric jellyfish are in the same category as the sky serpents that we talked about earlier. They're also classified as an atmospheric beast. They're thought to be massive jellyfish that float in the sky and can fly up through the atmosphere. The weirdest part about this, and what has these jellyfish higher on the list than our sky serpents, is that it's believed these jellyfish are also used as a UFO. That's right, guys, these are living creatures that are their own separate entity made up of organic matter, but they are also used as vessels for aliens to travel through space. Meaning that if you see an atmospheric jellyfish, then not only could that thing kill and eat you, but there are also probably tens of hundreds of other creatures inside the jellyfish that can do the same. Now, in all honesty, I don't really understand how the mode of transportation works here, or how this jellyfish can hold all of these additional people. I suppose we need to catch one to figure that out. But as ridiculous as all of this sounds, it actually piqued the interest of the scientific community. Since the mid-20th century, there have been hundreds of sightings of these atmospheric jellyfish, and scientists have been forced to investigate what could be behind this. Through these encounters, there have also been a lot of pictures that have been taken as well, and they're pretty good quality. One of the most notable is the Dutch flying jellyfish, a picture captured by Harry Penton in the Netherlands. As you can see, it looks like a UFO, but also like a jellyfish. And that's because people believe they are one and the same. Jellyfish are already kind of creepy animals, but giant ones that are flying through space carrying aliens on board, that's a whole nother level of creepy. And finally, number 1 on this list is Penanggalan. This creature is truly terrifying, and based on what it's capable of doing, it could be from space. Forgotten Realms Wiki says a Penanggalan had 2 forms. During the day, the Penanggalan appeared as a human female resembling its original form before undeath. At night, the Penanggalan returned to its lair and its head separated from its body, revealing a 3-foot-long tail. A Penanggalan's eyes glowed red in darkness. Now, what they don't describe there, and I think it's important to understand how creepy this thing is that the 3-foot-long tail it has is actually a bunch of intestines that are hanging from its head. This thing is vampiric in nature and goes around feasting on people with an affinity to those who are pregnant. They suck people completely dry of their blood as they're sleeping while they're in this floating head form. They're also very skilled fighters and will totally mess you up if you do happen to wake up while this is taking place. Now, there's currently no confirmed origin of these creatures, meaning that no one really knows where they came from. I think that space is a potential option here though, because they kind of remind me of the Thing from the horror movie of the same name. A gruesome creature that can disguise itself as a human, but truly just wants to kill and eat as many humans as possible. That same creature came from space, and I think that there's a lot of similarities between the two. This specific beast is typically found around Malaysia, so be very wary if you happen to find yourself around that country. Number 5 on this list is Qianggu. Qianggu is a massive legendary creature from China. This mythical creature is from space and has played a large part in it. Medium says, Qiangdu is a creature depicted as a dog or meteor in Chinese folklore that ate the moon or sun during an eclipse. Its name translates directly to heavenly dog, and in addition to eating celestial bodies, Qiangdu was assigned to the task of guarding the gates of heaven. Qiangdu's enormous size made him an obvious choice for the task. However, that same characteristic struck fear in the heart of humanity. So for this definition, Qiangdu isn't too scary, but actually kind. However, he has been noted by some to actually have a taste for human children. This is just a rumor and could be proven false, but then again, nobody really knows any of these things for sure. What we do know is that this is a massive beast, literally bigger than planets, that has immense power and has come from space. If it didn't eat children and was a calm dog, that'd still be a pretty scary pup to come face to face with. Number 4 on this list is the Jade Rabbit. The Jade Rabbit is actually a full-on bunny rabbit who lives on the moon. Now, I'm gonna be honest, guys, this isn't the scariest of the bunch for sure. He's actually kind of cute, but I wanted to include him because his power is super cool. He lives on the moon with Chang'e, and together they make the elixir for immortality. Wei Yi Hong details the legend beautifully by saying, one day the Jade Emperor decided that he wanted some help preparing the elixir of life for the immortals. Fearing that humans would be too selfish and untrustworthy for such an important role, he thought an animal would be better suited for this responsibility. The Jade Emperor came down to Earth disguised as a beggar and went to search for a worthy animal in the forest. As a famished and frail man, he cried out for help and food, and eventually 3 animals came to see if they could help: the monkey, the fox, and the rabbit. The animals were sympathetic to the old beggar's plight and went into the forest to search for food. The monkey returned laden with fruits he had gathered from up in the trees. The fox returned with some fish he had caught in a nearby stream. Despite searching throughout the forest, the rabbit could not find any food for the old man from the woodland floor. When he returned much later and saw the beggar sat next to the fire eating the fruits and the fish, the rabbit felt sad that he'd been unable to find him any food. Realizing that he could sacrifice himself so that the man could eat, the rabbit threw himself onto the fire in an ultimate act of selflessness. But at that instant, the beggar turned back into the Jade Emperor and stopped the rabbit from being burned. Having found the most noble of creatures to take on the role of creating elixirs, the Jade Emperor carried him up to the moon, where he learned to make divine medicines and he could be kept safe from humans wishing to steal the elixir of life. Every now and again, this mythical creature comes down to Earth to interact with humans. Although if it does come to you, then make sure you don't have a selfish bone in your body, or else it's gonna sense it and then bad things could befall you. Number 3 on this list is Cthulhu. Cthulhu is a creature that has come from the Lovecraftian universe. Even though this is a fictional character, many people have thought that there could be some serious legitimacy to Cthulhu, and maybe Lovecraft writings wasn't as fictional as we initially thought it was. Cthulhu is described as being a cosmic being of terrifying power and as the manifestation of chaos and destruction. Those are some pretty fearsome things to be associated with, and not a creature I really want to be messing around with. Cthulhu's appearance is definitely grotesque as well. Typically depicted as a dark green color, it has massive wings on its back, an octopus-like exterior, but with a body similar to a human, and also this massive bulbous sack thing that has huge tentacles coming out of it. Yeah, definitely not the type of dude that you'd want to bring to the club to wingman you. Cthulhu is a great old one, which is a super powerful being that has godlike abilities. Right now, this grotesque looking beast is located at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean in what people believe to be a very deep slumber. This is good for all of humankind and the world in general, because having this beast wake up probably means full-on destruction of our planet. Cthulhu is thought to have the ability to communicate telepathically with human beings without being anywhere even close to them. In fact, deep worshippers of this ancient god have tried to experiment with ways to contact it. Even though it's in a deep slumber, its brain is still active and can talk with you if you're able to summon it. This is very difficult though, and only a few people have claimed to be successful. Let's pray that Cthulhu is happy with its nap right now, because waking it up would just be all types of bad. Number 2 on this list is Nidhogg. Nidhogg is probably a mythical creature who you haven't heard of, but let me warn you that he's very ferocious. Nidhogg is a massive and very dangerous dragon that is in Norse mythology. He's said to gnaw at the roots of Yggdrasil, the tree which supports the 9 worlds. Mythology.net says Nidhogg is a tremendous dragon. His body is covered in bright scales and horns erupt from his head. A pair of forelegs complete with massive claws help him to rip at the roots of Yggdrasil, but he has no back legs, only a serpentine tail. Beneath his bat-like wings, he carries the corpses of criminals. His mammoth body can be found twisting through the roots of Yggdrasil, especially around Niflheimr, the cold world from which all the rivers of Midgard spring. Occasionally, he might slither into hell to visit the dark goddess who some people consider his master. So in case you don't know, Niflheimr is a totally separate world from our own, and therefore Nidhogg is actually from space. This dragon doesn't just sit around looking menacing though, it's got a very important role to play in Norse mythology. Mythology.net goes on to say, balance is extremely important in Norse mythology, and while Nidhogg doesn't represent a ghastly force, he is still important to supporting the balance of Yggdrasil. A great eagle, who represents wisdom and virtue, perches in the uppermost branches of the tree, while Nidhogg, representing chaos and evil, lurks in its roots. The constant tension between the eagle and the dragon is fueled by Draugr, a squirrel who runs up and down the tree ferrying insults between the two enemies. The tension may seem undesirable, but it actually promotes a cycle of growth in the Tree of Life. After the eagle and the dragon spend the day destroying Yggdrasil in their frenzy to attack each other, the tree is bathed in water from the wells of Urd, which promotes healing and new growth. So basically everybody, if you believe in Norse mythology, then we can thank Nidhogg for helping to keep things afloat. He's also credited with punishing criminals though, and he's very brutal about it, so try not to piss him off. And finally, number 1 on this list is aliens. Well, this one seems pretty obvious, but if I didn't put it on the list, then I'd look like a freaking idiot. Aliens come from space. This is what makes them aliens. For centuries, in fact, even longer than that, humans have been looking up to the skies above and wondering if people or beings are up there chilling. And for quite a while now as well, there have been tons of sightings of these creatures, leading us to believe that there are in fact living creatures up there. In fact, at this point, it's pretty much common knowledge in the scientific community that there is life. I talked about it in a previous video on here that it's simply a numbers game. The universe being infinite means that there are literally billions and billions of galaxies with the potential to foster life. Therefore, it's actually super unlikely that there wouldn't be aliens. It also just makes way too much sense that they exist considering how many sightings that we've had. One super famous one is by Kenneth Arnold. Intelligencer says, Kenneth Arnold, a respected pilot, claimed in 1947 he'd seen 9 mostly flat flat objects whipped past Mount Rainier at speeds he timed at 1,760 miles per hour. They were shaped like saucers, he reportedly explained, and were so thin I could barely see them. A neologism was born. Arnold, he demanded military personnel explain what the contraptions were if they knew, since he dismissed any possibility of them being guided missiles or new types of jets. His best guess, from another planet. Dozens of others came forward with similar sightings from as far away as Oklahoma and Arizona, but Arnold didn't enjoy his newfound celebrity. He said people had started shrieking in cafes when they saw him and fleeing. This is just one of the thousands of notable sightings that people have had about aliens in the past. They're definitely real, and they definitely come from space.
In at number 5 we have Wei-Chivo. The Wei-Chivo is known as the Spirit of Midnight and originated around the Mayan town of Yucatan. This creature is said to roam the mountains during the night and has a human body but a goat's head and legs, like a billy goat on 2 legs, which is the typical image of the devil according to the Mayan people. The Wei-Chivo has big twisted horns, large strong legs, and dangerously sharp claws, along with a long beard, hairy chest, and scary red eyes. These terrifying creatures can possess human intelligence, has a massive amount of strength, and can move extremely quick. The Wei-Chivo is said to have dreadful moans, thunderous laughter, insults its prey, and quenches its thirst with goat's blood. It is extremely evil, hates the light, and worships darkness. Their mission is to punish men for their sins, and if anyone speaks his name or reports his misdeeds, they will burn in the mouths of their victims so they can never utter his name again. The Wei-Chivo also loves to devour humans, especially children. There's a popular story of one of the first encounters with the beast, when a young man was on his way to visit his girlfriend in the town of Mukuchi. On his way, a being appeared on the road, and it was a half baby goat, half demon, black in color with bulging and flashing red eyes. The man tried to defend himself but ended up on the ground unconscious. The next morning he was found by a stranger, and for several days after the incident he suffered from vomiting and a high fever. He became delirious and repeated the words Wei-Chivo. According to some witnesses of the creature, they said they saw a trail of blood that followed behind the beast. The Wei-Chivo is a popular mythological creature in the Mayan community, with locals as well as all over Mexico. The stories have been told throughout generations. In the Mayan town of Valladolid in Yucatan, the locals believe this creature is an evil sorcerer that is capable of transforming into a goat-like creature and wreaking havoc on the locals and their livestock. In at number 4 we have El Nahul. The legend of El Nahul is over 500 years old and is told by many around Mexico, including the Aztecs, Toltecs, Mixes, Mayans, and the Yaquis, just to name a few. This creature can appear in many areas of the country because its home is the heart of humans. The El Nahul is half human and half beast and is a sorcerer that transforms at night into an animal, often a black dog or a jaguar. It eats cattle and children's blood, but it thrives on people's fears, desires, and hatred. It has glowing red eyes and emits fear in its victims with its terrifying laughter and grunts. They have the power to metamorphose, hypnotize, bewitch, and can cause illness and death. In the Mexican worldview, the Nahuls were believed to be protected by Tezcatlipoca, the Lord of the Night. Legend has it that this creature could shed its skin and become an earthly creature. Mayan and Spanish hunters claimed that during the night they had killed an animal and at dawn the corpse had been transformed into a man. This made people of Mexico believe that these creatures were sorcerers with the ability to become half man and half animal. The word Nahul is of Nahuatl origin, which translates to what is my garment or skin. The El Nahuls have the ability to choose their powers for good or evil, but tend to get more joy out being evil and causing destructions. They stalk their prey during the night and are man-eating, mass murderers, thieves, and thrive on using their dark magic to overpower the weak. In at number 3 we have Sinsamito. The Sinsamito is another creature coming from the Mayan people and can be translated to the devil, and consists of many different nicknames including Lord of Animals, the Savage Jungle Monster, and the Powerful Guardians of the Hill. This creature's story has been told for over 20 centuries by many all over Mexico. The Sinsamito tends to live in caves deep in the mountains near forests and jungles, but wander at night around the nearby villages. The Sinsamito is a muscular gorilla with human features and a man or woman's face, long hair on its head with thick brown hair all over its body, similar to a bear. Their feet are large, double the size of a human's, and are upside down. The creature's toes are spread apart and crooked backwards so they can't run, so they hop around using the support of a tree trunk, like a cane. It feeds on wild fruits, ashes of bonfires, and human flesh, and when they are in attack mode they have horrific panting hissing sounds that sounds like thunder and screams that pierce the entire jungle. The Sinzamaito is a creature that terrifies the Mayan people because it knows how to speak their language, and is immune to bullets and arrows. This creature's mission is to guard their home, which is the mountains, to terrorize the locals in the nearby villages and kill the men and kidnap the women whenever they can. These creatures are also legends and talked about by many in other places like Honduras and Belize. In Honduras, the people believe that they will hunt for women to kidnap, they find one to fall in love with, and then will claim that woman as their own and she will never be seen again. In Belize, the Sinzamaito feast on humans, and the belief is that if you're a man and you look at the beast in the eyes and are able to escape, then you have a 100% chance that they will die within the month. If you're a woman and you look at the beast in the eyes and they manage to escape, your life will be prolonged. Better to be a woman, I guess. In at number 2 we have Tucacami. The Tucacami originated from the indigenous people of Mexico. The Huichol in their language, Tucumami translates to the devil. The Huichol has talked about the Tucumami creature for centuries, and with each generation the story of this creature is passed on. The Huichol people reside in Sierra Madre Occidental Range in the states of Nayarit, Jalisco, Zacatecas, and Durango, as well as in the United States. This ghoulish demon is the grandson of Uster, who is the goddess of the underworld who devours the dead and a distant relative of all vampires that exist. They reside in the underworld, but they also haunt the desert during the new moon and appear in the hallucinations produced by peyote. Peyote is a small cactus and is used in many Native American religious ceremonies, especially among the Huichol people, and can cause hallucinations, and this terrifying creature knows this and takes advantage of it. This creature appears as a human body but sometimes looks like a skeleton or a wolf-like creature. It's black and white stripes and it's always blood-stained. Its face is painted like a horrific mask with dirty white spots, has buzzard or bat-like wings, and has massive horns on its head like a devil. The creature's mission is to become the ruler of the underworld, and it thrives off being a cannibal and scavenger to suck up bones, clean corpses, and snatch souls. The Tucacami feed on human flesh, and they never bathe or drink water, so if their appearance doesn't terrify you, their stench will. It also has the power to cause its victims dementia and use it as a weapon. They're devious, sneaky, and extremely dangerous. Even though this demonic creature is mythical, it's very real in the eyes of the Huichol people and many around Mexico. There have been many sightings throughout history, and the story of Tucacami lives on to this day. And finally, in at number 1 we have Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is a legendary creature known all over the world, but it originated in Mexico. It was first sighted in Puerto Rico, and it's believed to attack and drink the blood of livestock. The Chupacabra is a legendary creature known all over the world, but it originated in Mexico. It is believed to attack and drink the blood of livestock, especially goats. Chupacabra literally translate as goat sucker. This blood-sucking creature varies in appearance. Some say it looks like a large hairless dog, while others say it looks like an alien-like reptile and is the size of a small bear, with rows of spines reaching from the neck to the base of the tail. The most popular reports say this creature has leathery or scaly greenish-grey skin and sharp spines or quills running down its back. It is said to be 4 feet high and stand and hop similar to a kangaroo. Sightings have been reported in many parts of Mexico, and some in Puerto Rico since the 1970s. This creature has been seen as far as north as Maine and as far as south as Chile, and even outside of the US in parts of Russia and the Philippines. A 5-year investigation was done by Benjamin Radford that was documented throughout this book, Tracking the Chupacabra, and he had concluded that the description given by the original eyewitnesses, Madeline Tolentino, was based on a creature in the 1995 science fiction horror movie Species. The alien creature Syl is nearly identical to the description given by Madeline, and she claims to have seen the movie before. It was concluded at the end of Benjamin's investigation that he seriously undermines the credibility of the Chupacabra as a real animal. In October of 2010, University of Michigan biologist Barry O'Connor concluded that all of the Chupacabra reports in the United States were simply coyotes infected with a parasite, which would explain most of the features of the Chupacabra because they would be left with little fur, thickened skin, and a disgusting odor. There are also reports of stray Mexican hairless dogs being mistaken for these creatures. All of this doesn't stop the constant stories and sightings seen throughout Mexico and all over the world, and the story of the Chupacabra continues to be told and is said to be the most well-known mythological creature that comes from Mexico.
Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-352, the Old Crone, the Witch, the revenge-fueled Russian, Baba Yaga. We've all heard some variation of this story at some point, whether it was done up in a movie, for a TV show, or even as a monster in a creepypasta. Well, Baba Yaga exists in the SCP universe too, and she is quite the handful. She appears to be an old, emaciated woman, but that's just how she looks. This SCP is much faster and stronger than her appearance belies, able to lift things as heavy as 200 kilograms with little effort and moving as fast as 70 kilometers per hour. She can even recover from wounds that would be fatal to other humans, even stuff like disembowelment. An absolute force to be reckoned with for sure, and that is just the beginning. She can grow strange, clear hairs from different points on her body at a pretty fast rate, and these have been reported as creeping and crawling across surfaces. They're covered in a strange enzyme that 352 produces, which on contact with human tissue causes a horrific reaction. Those affected by this enzyme will stop logically thinking altogether and cease to feel any pain. They enter a state of euphoria, during which Baba Yaga begins to eat them limb by limb over the course of many days. So even though they're being eaten, they don't really know what's going on. This SCP was originally discovered in a Russian forest after many people reported mysterious disappearances in the area. And if we look to Russian folklore, we find a lot of the same characteristics attributed to the legendary character. Baba Yaga has appeared in hundreds of folktales with a variety of hallmarks that seem to be closely associated with her. There's the hut with chicken legs, a mortar and pestle, and the mop/broom that appear quite often. She's also regarded as being especially ferocious looking and tends to be extremely repulsive to those who behold her. After all those years terrorizing Slavic folks who dared to enter magical forests, she's finally been contained by the SCP Foundation, although they tend to have a lot of trouble keeping her contained. As of right now, the Foundation is attempting to find a type of food that will keep her satisfied and docile, but human flesh is the only thing that seems to elicit said behavior. Good thing there's a lot of D-class, right? Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-1826. The Wild Hunt. This is a tale as old as time, often characterized by a large group of hunters being led through a truly insane expedition by a god or other powerful creature. While the term itself was coined by Jacob Grimm, there have been examples of this kind of story all throughout history, all across different cultures. When you encounter a wild hunt, that's bad news. They tend to be omens of catastrophe, whether that be war, famine, or plague. Although for some folks, it just means they're gonna die soon, which sucks, but at least it's only bad for one person. SCP-1826 is an adapted version of the Wild Hunt, as seen by folks at the Foundation. There's an office building somewhere in the Ukraine that hosts a yearly Wild Hunt. Nobody really understands how it all got started, but here we are. During the month of March, this place is totally off limits. If any sort of sapient organism enters this empty cubicle graveyard during that time frame, they're gonna get swept up in the excitement. And by excitement, I mean they're gonna have to partake in the hunt, which will guarantee their untimely death. Yeah. Also, there has to be a black canine in the building for this to work, but that happens surprisingly often for whatever reason. So when the Wild Hunt begins, the entity that causes it will manifest in its host body in front of whatever person has entered the building. They will announce their intent to engage them and hand them a weapon. The hunt begins, and they attempt to avoid whoever is there for as long as possible. And when a fatality occurs, the corpse gets absorbed into the walls. What a fun pastime for glory, I suppose. At that point, the foliage will begin to rapidly grow in the area. Folks have claimed to see dozens of winged humanoids manifesting in the area, which may be instances of folks who didn't survive the hunt, or possibly just some entities who were historically connected to the leader of the hunt. Hard to say for sure, but it's pretty interesting. These days, the SCP is neutralized. See, when these winged entities made their way out into the open on one occasion, an MTF opened fire on them and collected the 22 corpses that resulted. So for now, the Wild Hunt has been called off, and since then, nobody's entered the building during March. Probably for the best in the end. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-1448. Urban legends are mythology too. Modern mythology, stuff that highlights the values and fears of the populace today. Usually we associate mythology with ancient tales from long-lost societies, but we're living in a culture that will one day be considered ancient. Better write all these down, eh? This SCP is specifically associated with the creation of urban legend. It's an incorporeal entity that is really hard to see, can shapeshift rapidly, and tends to migrate often. Wherever it ends up, it seems to pick a generally spooky or otherwise disconcerting location or object and begins to inhabit that space. Some common examples are churches, old tree stumps, small bodies of water, and abandoned amusement parks. Once it settles on a location, the tendency for stories about said location to be told will increase. Usually there will have been a death in the area too, which helps the whole myth-making process. Rumors pertaining to the newly formed urban legend in the area will spread quickly as more people learn about whatever spooky things supposedly happen there. Eventually, rituals will be imagined by the local populace at large, which are supposed to cause unlikely things to happen. But none of the stuff is actually real. It's all just a side effect of the entity that is SCP-1448 being in the area. But everyone who encounters it will believe it. And that's how a whole lot of urban legends were started apparently. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-1179. Currently, this SCP is missing in action. Nobody's seen it since the 60s, but I'm sure someday it will appear again. We might not like it when it does, though. The way it's been described is as a giant, vaguely human figure carved from volcanic rock. But it's not a statue. In fact, some folks say that it is the Norse Eljotun Suitor. You know, the giant guarding the gate of the fire realm, the one that's 30 meters tall, has a beard and horns. Yeah, that one. The thing is, these mythological creatures are well known for their ability to shapeshift as well, which is part of why nobody really knows where it is these days. It can change form, become invisible, and even fly, and any photographic evidence of the monster has been rendered inconclusive, whether thanks to technological malfunction, operator error, or destruction of gear. Although some folks have reported 1179 having hellfire for eyes and stinking of sulfur, so there's that. If I've learned anything from horror movies and reading SCP entries, it's that if a mythological creature doesn't want to be found, you should probably not go looking for it. Even if you do end up locating your target, you're not going to be too happy with what happens next. Finally, at number 1, we've got SCP-3844. It's a dragon, and a pretty chill one too. At the beginning of the 20th century, a group of explorers came across the dwelling of a giant flying fire-breathing reptile. Like many dragons in many different stories, this one can actually communicate with humans. And originally, it was very friendly too. It treated the humans who would visit as friends and even shared drinks and treasure with them. But over time, the Foundation had to amp up their containment procedures to ensure that this anomaly remained hidden. Which at first was okay with the dragon, but not flying was a tough deal. Over time, the dragon grew smaller and felt as though the wonders of the world were being slowly sapped away. As the Foundation supplied it with more reading material and more explanations as to how the world around it functioned, it became less content, especially as it could not experience the world itself in order to keep it hidden away. In the end, the dragon decided that it could not wait around any longer as the world's whimsy disappeared before its very eyes, so it attempted to fly away, resulting in Foundation forces shooting it down. Very tragic. However, a new document has been added to the many files that make up 3844's entry. Apparently there might be more dragons in the mountains, less willing to interact in good faith with the Foundation, but at least there are still some around. Myths are just stories that stuck around longer than most, right? Their timelessness is well deserved, and I'm sure that with more time we'll see many more classics crop up. So what'd you think of the list? Did you know all these SCPs were linked to larger tales? Kicking us off at number 5, we've got the Draugr. What better place to start than with the classic National Zombie variant? These are no simple shamblemen though. Draugr are serious business. I love the possible origin for the word, a pale, ineffectual, and slow-minded person that drags himself along. Remind you of anyone? They live in their graves with many different goals depending on the situation. Some will just be guarding the treasure buried with them in their burial mound, which explains all the Draugr guarding underground treasure chests in Skyrim. Others just want to wreak general havoc, and some simply just want to torment those who cause them problems in life. I can relate. In terms of physical form, Draugr are animated corpses. Unlike other ghosts, these guys basically have all the same physical abilities that they did in life, plus more. Superhuman strength, shape-shifting, and size-changing abilities, and a wild amount of unexpected heaviness can make them formidable foes too. They can slay their victims in many ways, often crushing them with their enlarged forms like a thwomp, devouring their flesh, drinking their blood, and, of course, driving them mad. They're versatile. When this becomes too much of an issue, it takes a hero to wrestle them back into their graves. Conventional weapons don't have much of an effect on these rotten rapscallions, so they've got to be forced back underground and held there. And if you're not careful, they'll swim right back up through the rock. It's been said that runestones can be implemented to keep them underground, but I prefer the decapitation and burning method. Whatever works, to be honest. Coming in at number 4, Pesta. Like pestilence, right? I don't think that's the actual origin of the name, but if the shoe fits. Pesta is the personification of the plague in the form of an old woman in a black hood. Old ladies aren't too scary on their own, but with the knowledge that any old lady wearing black could end your life with terrible disease, that's horrifying. If you spot her while traveling, you'll know it's her. Pesta isn't malevolent or evil, she just sort of brings disease with her everywhere. And she's impossible to keep away, so don't bother. Keep an eye out though. If you do see her enter a town with a rake, some folks will die. If she rolls through with a broom, make your peace. No one's getting out alive. There's an old story of a ferryman who gave a ride to an old woman. As soon as she got on, he realized exactly who it was. The ferryman asked for his life to be spared, but to no avail. Pesta told him that he would die, but because he was kind enough to give her a ride, it would be an easy death. After he dropped her off, the ferryman went home exhausted, went to bed, and never woke up. There are worse fates, I suppose. Coming in at number 3, Fenrir. Child of Loki, brother to Jormungandr. This is a big wolf. The biggest wolf in Norse mythology, in fact. Prophecies foretold great trouble stemming from Fenrir and his rapid growth, so the gods raised him themselves to retain control. For a while, havoc was waylaid. However, Fenrir grew extremely fast. They tried to chain him up to keep him at bay, but the first 2 attempts were unsuccessful. The gods then convinced the giant wolf that the bindings were actually a game, a test of strength. Then the dwarves were commissioned to make a new rope, stronger than ever, with the appearance of being light and soft. Fenrir was suspicious of this chain though, and would only agree to put it on if one of the gods put their hand in his mouth as a gesture of good faith. Tyr was brave enough to do so, knowing that his hand would soon be separate from his person, and thus Fenrir was able to break free and Tyr was no longer able to play guitar. Tied to a boulder with a sword stuck in his mouth for ages, Fenrir had nothing to do but howl and drool, creating the frothy river expectation. At Ragnarok, he will break free and run through the world, upper jaw in the sky, lower jaw on the ground, and devour everything in his path. He'll also kill Odin before being killed by one of Odin's sons. I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily want to lay eyes upon a giant vacuum-mouthed wolf eating everything and anything. Well, actually, scratch that. If it's the last thing I'll see, I'm pretty down. Coming in at number 2, we've got Jormungandr, the giant snake living in the ocean surrounding Midgard, so large that it encompasses the entire world and then eats its own tail. Ouroboros, baby! As I previously mentioned, it's the sibling of Fenrir, which is kind of odd considering one is a wolf and one is a snake, but hey, Loki liked to get freaky. Jormungandr is famous for having a wicked rivalry with Thor and engaging in many legendary battles with the hammer-wielding thunder god. One of said tales has Thor fishing in the sea for the serpent. He snags it, starts pulling. As it gets closer to the surface, the giant Hymir becomes terrified. He sees Jormungandr dribbling blood and poison and decides to cut the line, sending the snake back to the depths. Thor was not happy about this development. He got his rematch later on though, of course, when the two met during Ragnarok. One telltale sign that Ragnarok is coming is the violent unrest of the seas. This happens because our slippery pal here has released his tail from his mouth and begins to thrash around and then flop on land. Once this happens, it will spit poison to fill half the earth. The snake and the god do battle, with Thor emerging victorious, but then succumbing to poison. Lose-lose, fellas, that's not the way we wanted this to go. Another fun fact with the gigantic serpent is that continental Germans used to attribute earthquakes to his movements, which is especially terrifying in context. Imagine you're a German peasant and an earthquake rolls through. Your house? Rubble. Your wife? Pancaked. Your crops? Shaken, not stirred. And what explanation do you have? Oh, it's a snake bigger than anything you could ever imagine? Cool. Good to know that's just slithering around beneath us and could surface at any moment. I definitely won't live the rest of my life in crippling fear. And finally at number 1, Surt. In the beginning, there was only the blackness of Ginnungagap. Then Surt appeared out of the darkness with his flaming sword and touched land. It lit up and became the land of fire. Eventually it came close enough to Niflheim, the realm of ice. This contact warmed and melted the frozen earth, revealing Ymir, the primal frost giant, along with the great cow. And thus life was created with the meeting of ice and fire. Just wait though, because like any good parent will tell you, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. Ah, memories. Surt is a fire giant who played a part in creating life and also shows up during Ragnarok to do 2 things. No, not kick ass and chew bubblegum. He's fated to kill the god Freyr and be slain by him in return. This and destroy the world with his flaming sword. Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. A massively destructive parental figure with a fire blade. He's not mad, he's just disappointed.
Coming in at 5, Harpy. Hailing from Greek mythology and Roman mythology, a harpy is a half-human and half-bird personification of storm winds. They have generally been depicted as birds with the heads of maidens, faces pale with hunger and long claws on their hands. They have however been depicted in various forms by various writers. To Hesiod they were imagined as fair locked and winged maidens who surpassed winds and birds in the rapidity of their flight. The harpies seemed originally to have been wind spirits, their names meaning snatchers or swift robbers, and they steal food from their victims while they are eating and carrying evildoers to the Erinyes. If a person would suddenly disappear from Earth, it was said that he had been carried off by the harpies. In this form they were agents of punishment who abducted people and tortured them on their way to Tartarus. They were depicted as being vicious, cruel and violent. They were sometimes even referred to as the hounds of mighty Zeus. In later texts, writers listed the harpies among the guardians of the underworlds, among other monstrosities such as centaurs, Scylla, Briareus, Lernaean, Hydra, Chimera, Gorgons, and Geryon. Coming in at number 4, Hippogriff. The Hippogriff is a legendary creature which has the front half of an eagle and the hind half of a horse. The second mention of the Hippogriff in history was made by the Latin poet Jaime Uni, though sometimes depicted during the classical era during the rule of the Merovingians. It was used by Ludovico Ariosto in his Orlando Furiosa at the beginning of the 16th century. In the poem, the Hippogriff is a steed born of a mare and a griffin. It is extremely fast and is presented as being able to fly around the world and to the moon. It is often ridden by magicians and the wandering knight Ruggiero, and from the creature's back frees the beautiful Angelica. The Hippogriff is a symbol of the Greek god Apollo, either through his connection to the Muses or as god of the sun. In the aforementioned poem by Ariosto, the Hippogriff is described as, I quote, "No fiction wrought magic lore, but natural was the steed the wizard pressed. For him a filly to griffin bore, height Hippogriff, in wings and beak and crest, form like his sire, as in the feet before, but like the mare his dam in all the rest. Such on Riphaean hills, though rarely found, are bred beyond the frozen ocean's bound. Drawn by enchantment from his distant lair, the wizard thought but how to tame the foal, and in a month instructed him to bear saddle and bit and gallop to the goal, and execute on earth or in mid-air all shifts of manege, course and carousel. He with such labour wrought this only real, where all rest was hollow and ideal." However, Thomas Bulfinch's legend of Charlemagne continues the description by stating, I quote, "Like a griffin is the head of an eagle, claws armed with talons and wings covered with feathers, the rest of its body being that of a horse. This strange animal is called a hippogriff. The hippogriff is said to be an evil spirit resting and possessing its soul in that of the horse and griffin." Coming in at 3, Sylph. Sylph is a mythological air spirit, with the term originating in the 16th century works of Paracelsus, who described sylphs as invisible beings of the air, his elementals of air. In the Liber de Nymphis of the Philosophia Magna, Paracelsus discusses the characteristics of the elementals at length. Sylphs are rougher, coarser, taller and stronger than humans. Sylphs are said to be closer to humans in conception because they move through the air like we do. While in fire they burn, in water they drown, and in earth they get stuck. In 1765, the French author Jean-François Marmental had found the Sylph legend to be notable enough to be included among his moral tales, the story of the Sylph husband, in which a young woman obsessed with the idea of marrying a Sylph is deluded into falling in love with her arranged husband after he impersonates one. Savage. As you would expect, Sylphs have often been compared to fairies due to their association with the ballet La Sylphide, where Sylphs are identified with fairies and the medieval legends of Fairlands, as well as the confusion with other airy spirits. A slender woman may be referred to as a Sylph. Coming in at 2, Wyvern. A wyvern is a legendary bipedal dragon with a tail often ending in a diamond or arrow-shaped tip. The wyvern is a popular creature in European and British literature, video games, and modern fantasy. In heraldry and folklore, the wyvern is a fire-breathing two-legged dragon sometimes portrayed in fancy books as frost-breathing or even poison-breathing. Since the 16th century, in English, Scottish, and Irish heraldry, the key difference between the wyvern and the dragon is that a wyvern has 2 legs, whereas a dragon has 4. In modern fiction is where this beast shines though. Wyverns, when present as creatures, tend to appear as less magical and more as dangerous beasts. Smaller, weaker and less intelligent than dragons. Also, unlike dragons, who are more feared for their ferocity and sharp teeth, wyverns are often associated with poison, either in the form of venomous fangs or poisonous breath, but this trait is not universally represented. Outside of fiction, the wyvern is a fairly popular commercial logo or mascot, especially in Wales and Worcestershire. That's where I was born, the more you know. As well as it is a frequent mascot of athletic teams, colleges and universities. In English heraldry and vexillology, the wyvern often appears, typically depicted resting upon its legs and tail, but may also be depicted with its claws in the air and only supported by its tail. Fun facts. And finally coming in at number 1, the griffin. The griffin, also known as griffon or gryphon, is a legendary creature with the body, tail, and back legs of a lion, the head and wings of an eagle, and sometimes an eagle's talons as its front feet. Now, because the lion was considered the king of the beasts and the eagle king of the birds, by the Middle Ages the griffin was thought to be an especially powerful and majestic creature. Since classical antiquity, griffins were known for guarding treasures and priceless possessions. Most statuary representations of griffins depict them with bird-like talons or oftentimes feathered. When depicted on coats of arms, the griffin is called the Ophiuchus, referring to the serpent astronomical constellation. Now, representations of griffin-like hybrids with 4 legs and beaked head appeared in ancient Iranian and ancient Egyptian art dating back to before 3000 BC. Now, in medieval lore, griffins not only mated for life, but if either partner died, then the other would continue the rest of its life alone, never to search for a new mate. The griffin was in turn made an emblem of the church's opposition to remarriage. Being an aerial bird and a terrestrial beast, it was seen in Christendom to be a symbol of Jesus, who was both human and divine. John Milton in Paradise Lost 2 refers to the legend of the griffin in describing Satan as when a griffin through the wilderness with winged course o'er hill or moory dale pursues the Arimaspian who by stealth had from his wakeful custody purloined the guarded gold. Younger viewers may also be familiar with the griffin from the Harry Potter series, who also guards gold.
Kicking off at number 5, the Minotaur. And the fact that this horrifying creation is chasing up the rear at number 5 should say something about the ferocity of this list. You see, the Minotaur, for all intents and purposes, whilst being an icon of folklore and mythology, is also a creature of such pain, torment and revulsion that it was actually pretty hard to stomach, comparable to many other Greek legends. It's one that has found its way into the fold of many interlocking myths, a grotesque abomination that possessed the body of a man and the head of a bull, captured and confined to his labyrinthine prison on the island of Crete. In many ways, the Minotaur is the embodiment of all of the harrowing themes so often found in Greek mythology: pity, rage, unbridled cruelty, disobeying the gods, the penance of breaking cultural and societal taboos. And on that note, yeah, we should probably explain just how the Minotaur got its bull-headed head. I'm not too sure who to feel sorry for actually, but maybe make your own minds up about that. As the legend goes, King Minos, before his time as the ruler of Crete, competed with his brothers for the throne of the island. In desperation, Minos prayed to Poseidon, the god of the sea, to send him a snow-white bull as a sign of his support. Poseidon did so under the sole condition that he was to kill the bull to show his honor to the deity, but instead Minos kept it because of its great beauty. To punish him, Poseidon made Pasiphae, Minos' wife, fall deeply in love with the bull. Through some strange manner of craftsmanship, she eventually mated with the snow-white bull, and thus she birthed the Minotaur. At first she nursed him as a mother, but he quickly grew ferocious and began eating small children before working his way up to fully sized adults. Eventually the Minotaur had caused so much cannibalistic chaos that King Minos commissioned Daedalus, the father of Icarus, to construct an impossible labyrinth to contain the Minotaur, and eventually it was engineered near the palace of Knossos. To appease the savage Minotaur and later to appease King Minos for the death of his son Androgeus, the city of Athens were bound to send 7 young men and 7 young maidens to be released into the labyrinth and feasted upon by the beast every year, until eventually it was slain by the hero Theseus. And yeah, guys, this is just the introduction. Swinging in at number 4, the Chimera, which, whilst being a word I just love to say, also I love saying chimeric. The Chimera of ancient Greek mythology deserves its place on this list for its influence alone. Although on the surface the Chimera may seem like a hodgepodge of things that don't ever quite mesh for the unbridled horror that we expect, this terrifying monster is far more than the sum of its parts. First appearing in the Iliad, penned by the legendary Homer himself, the Chimera was initially described as a thing of immortal make, not human, lion-fronted and snake behind, a goat in the middle, and snorting out the breath of the terrible flame of bright fire. A ferocious fire-breathing monstrosity, the Chimera was traditionally considered to have been a female creature, one that had given birth to both the Sphinx and the Nemean lion of antiquity. It is a monster that was greatly feared by the ancient Greeks, and it would appear as an omen to many, heralding storms, shipwrecks and natural disasters. The Chimera is perhaps best known for its part in the legend of Bellerophon, the hero of the city of Corinth, who was ordered by the king of Lycia to slay the beast in penance for his past sins. Knowing that he would need assistance for such a mighty task, Bellerophon prayed and slept in the temple of Athena, urging the goddess of wisdom to bestow upon him a blessing fit for a hero. Upon waking, Bellerophon was led by the hand by the goddess to the mythical horse Pegasus, a divine creature that possessed the power of flight, because, well, how do you defeat a fire-breathing lion with a poison venomous snake tail? Well, a giant flying horse, of course. And if you want to know where that particular horse came from, hold your horses, because we'll get to that. Eventually, Bellerophon attacked the creature from the air, impaling its mouth with a spear of pure lead that melted just as the chimera breathed its fire on it, smelting the ore to its face and then suffocating it to death. And that's the end of the chimera, really? Or is it? Yeah, it is. Next up at number 3, the Hydra. And of course, because I just bet you guys were expecting this particular many-headed monster to rear all of its head towards us. Actually. In fact, in many ways, the Hydra is perhaps one of the most iconic creatures in the whole of Greek mythology, and if anything, it's certainly the poster child of the many-headed mantra of evil. And if you're expecting a Hail Hydra joke, please, you know better than that. The Lernaean Hydra, or more simply known as the Hydra, is a serpentine water monster that finds its crossover in both Greek and Roman mythology. According to the poet Hesiod, the serpentine Hydra was said to possess poisonous breath and blood so virulent that even breathing in the miasma that it exuded was deadly enough. The Hydra possessed many heads, the exact number of which varies from source to source, and in some texts were actually infinite. You see, in some stories, the Hydra was a creature of great regeneration, and whichever head was cut from its body, 2 more would grow back in its place. Interestingly enough, many parallels of the same creature appear in Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian mythologies, but the most iconic of them all occurs in the infamous Greek legend, the 12 Labours of Heracles, which, side note, is a hella messed up legend to begin with, down to the fact that after being driven mad by Hera, Heracles killed his son, daughter, and his own wife, Megara. Yeah, Disney. You missed that bit out, didn't ya? You see, hoping for some kind of penance, Heracles undertook the 12 labours as a feat of near certain death, and the Hydra just so happened to be his second pit stop in that struggle. Before attacking the Hydra, Heracles covered his mouth and nose with a cloth to avoid the deadly toxins, and after realising that trying to hack off each head was a hopeless task, he took to cauterising each head one by one with a flaming torch. Well, I suppose if you're going to repent for murdering your own family, that's one way to do it. Coming in at number 2, the Gorgons. Of course, it just had to be. And in fear of us all turning into stone, I would recommend squinting for this particular segment. Seriously. Don't say I didn't warn you. Now, whilst the mythical race of Gorgons are incredibly prolific throughout ancient Greek mythology, of course, the most iconic of them all is Medusa. Don't get too ahead of your snake hair though, because we'll get to her shortly, and there's actually much more to it than just a villainous, stone-gazing monster. You see, whilst the description of Gorgons vary from text to text, they were said to have been birthed by the union of Phorcys, the sea god who often appeared as a crab, and Ceto, the sea goddess and mother of monsters. Gorgons were depicted as having wings, brazen claws, the tusks of boars, and stone skin. Now, although the Gorgon will later become an image of great power and protection, in early antiquity they were the OGs of horrifying evil. And yeah, by OG, I do mean original Gorgon. To get to their later depiction though, of course, we have to tell the tale of the most famous Gorgon, Medusa, and the hero Perseus. As the legend tells it, Medusa was born of the Gorgons with a hideous face and a serpent's tail where her leg should have been. She was said to have been the only one of the 3 remaining Gorgons that was not immortal. And so King Polydictus dispatched Perseus in the hope of distracting him long enough for him to seduce his mother. What a jerk. Anyway, armed with a scythe and a mirrored shield gifted to him by Athena in lieu of being turned into stone by gazing at her, Perseus managed to use the reflection of the shield to safely cut off Medusa's head, and as the vile stream of blood spouted from her neck and fell into the sea, the winged horse Pegasus was born. Hey, told you we'd get to the Pegasus's origin story, right? The thing is though, after this whole debacle, Perseus attached Medusa's head to his shield and used it to kick some and take some names on his way home before giving it back to Athena as a gift, who then took it as her symbol and placed it on her shield. Greek mythology, guys, it's allegorical. I promise. I think. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Typhon. And it just has to be really, because for a pantheon of terrifying creatures of mythology, the one that gave birth to pretty much all of them has to take the top spot. Typhon is the father of all monsters. He was birthed from the Titan union of Gaia and Tartarus and was said to have been the most ferocious creature that has ever roamed the earth. Typhon was impossibly large, and it was said that when he stood upright, his head would brush against the stars. The lower half of his body consisted of the tails of 2 coiled vipers that would hiss and spit venom at his foes, and from his fingers several dragons' heads would erupt and spit flames beneath him. Typhon was said to have wings so large that when spread they would blot out the sun. Fire would spill from his eyes like molten lava, and it was said that whoever gazed upon him would perish in fear, even the mighty Olympians. And yes, that included even the mightiest of all the Olympians, Zeus himself. You see, Typhon was such a terrifying and powerful entity that the only conceivable opponent to defy him was Zeus himself. At the dawn of all things, whilst the other Olympians trembled and fled in fear, Zeus stood his ground against this monstrous being, resulted in a great battle where countless earthquakes and devastating tsunamis raged across the planet. In fact, as Greek mythology makes pretty clear, the war that raged between Zeus and Typhon was so mighty that it threatened to break the planet clean in two. Eventually, Zeus managed to gain the upper hand and he triumphed over Typhon by firing 100 thunderbolts to the head of the monster, casting him back down into the pits of Tartarus, where he was sealed away for all time. Yet, even the pits of Tartarus aren't enough to fully contain the rage of Typhon, and whilst he remains trapped beneath the earth, the fits of anger that he experiences manifest themselves in the form of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. And what more can we say? Greek mythology, again, it's allegorical, I promise.